It all started with a thunderous crash at 6:47 a.m. on a Tuesday. His front door splintered under the force of a battering ram, and before he could even process the sound, 3 uniformed HOA enforcers stormed into his living room, shouting, "You're in violation!" The words echoed off the walls of his modest suburban home, a place he'd fought hard to make his own. He wasn't just some guy caught off guard in his boxers. He was a man with a crew, a reputation, and a simmering sense of justice. By the end of the week, his biker brothers would roll up to the HOA's pristine headquarters, Harleys roaring, ready to turn a petty neighborhood dispute into a reckoning nobody would forget. He woke up that morning like any other, the faint hum of his neighbor's lawnmower cutting through the early quiet. His name was Marcus, a 38-year-old mechanic who'd spent half his life wrenching on bikes and the other half riding them. He wasn't the type to stir up trouble, but trouble always seemed to find him. His house sat on the edge of Willow Creek, a gated community where the HOA ruled like a small dictatorship. Marcus had moved there 3 years ago, not because he loved the manicured lawns or the cookie-cutter houses, but because it was close to his shop and had a garage big enough for his tools and his prized 2003 Harley Softail. The place was a compromise, a way to keep his life steady after years of chaos. But the HOA had other plans. The trouble started 6 months back when Marcus parked his Harley in his driveway overnight. He'd been working late at the shop, tuning up a customer's chopper, and didn't have the energy to roll it into the garage. The next morning, a pink slip was taped to his handlebars. Violation of HOA Code 17.3, unauthorized vehicle storage. He laughed it off, crumpled the paper, and tossed it in the trash. Big mistake. The notices kept coming, each one more aggressive than the last. They cited his grass being half an inch too long, his mailbox leaning slightly to the left, even the unapproved shade of his curtains. Marcus ignored them all. He wasn't about to let a bunch of clipboard-wielding busybodies tell him how to live. But the HOA wasn't playing. Willow Creek's Homeowners Association had a reputation for being ruthless. They called their enforcement team compliance officers, but everyone in the neighborhood just called them the HOA cops. These weren't your average security guards. They were ex-cops and wannabe tough guys who patrolled the streets in golf carts, armed with walkie-talkies and an inflated sense of power. They'd fine you for leaving a trash can out past 7 a.m. or pressure, wash your siding if they thought it looked unkempt. Most residents caved under the pressure, paying fines and trimming their hedges to exact specifications. Marcus wasn't most residents. That Tuesday morning when the door came crashing down, Marcus was still in bed, dreaming about a long ride through the desert. The sound jolted him awake, heart pounding, as he stumbled into the living room in nothing but a pair of old gym shorts. 3 men stood there, all in matching navy polos with Willow Creek HOA compliance stitched on the chest. The leader, a stocky guy with a buzz cut and a name tag reading Gary, held a clipboard like it was a badge of honor. "Marcus Reed, you're in violation of multiple HOA regulations," Gary barked, his voice sharp and rehearsed. "Failure to comply with notices 47, 52, and 63. You've got 24 hours to vacate the premises or face legal action." Marcus blinked, still half asleep, trying to process what was happening. "You broke my door," he said, his voice low but steady. "You're standing in my house, yelling about violations, and you broke my damn door." Gary didn't flinch. He just pointed at the clipboard, rattling off a list of infractions. The Harley in the driveway, an unapproved oil stain on the pavement, a fence post that was structurally non-compliant. Marcus felt his blood start to boil. He wasn't a hothead anymore. Not like he was in his 20s, but this was something else. This wasn't just a fine or a warning. This was an invasion. "Get out," Marcus said, stepping closer to Gary. The other 2 officers shifted, hands hovering near their belts like they were ready for a fight. Marcus wasn't intimidated. He'd faced down worse than these rent-a-cops in his days riding with the Iron Vipers, a biker crew that wasn't quite a gang but wasn't exactly a book club either. Gary smirked, tossing a packet of papers onto the coffee table. 24 hours, Reed. "Fix the violations or we'll be back with the sheriff." They turned and left, stepping over the shattered remains of his front door like it was nothing. Marcus stood there for a long time, staring at the wreckage. His neighbors peeked through their blinds, but nobody came to check on him. That's how it was in Willow Creek. Everyone kept their heads down, afraid of the HOA's wrath. Marcus wasn't like them. He grabbed his phone and dialed Tommy, his oldest friend and the unofficial leader of the Iron Vipers. "They smashed my door, man," Marcus said, his voice tight. Cops came in yelling about violations. "I need the crew." Tommy didn't ask questions. He just said, "We'll handle it. Meet at the shop tonight." The Iron Vipers weren't outlaws, but they weren't saints either. They were a tight-knit group of guys, mechanics, welders, a couple of ex-cons, who'd bonded over bikes and a shared distrust of authority. They met at Marcus's shop, Reed's Custom Rides, a squat brick building just outside Willow Creek. By 8 p.m., the lot was packed with Harleys, their chrome gleaming under the streetlights. Tommy was there, all 6'4" of him, with a graying beard and a leather vest that had seen better days. Next to him was Jake, a wiry guy with a knack for electronics, and Big Mike, who looked like he could bench press a Buick. There were 8 of them total, each one ready to back Marcus up. Marcus laid it out for them: the notices, the door, the threats. He didn't want violence, not yet, but he wanted the HOA to know they couldn't push him around. Tommy leaned back, cracking his knuckles. "We roll up to their headquarters," he said. "Show 'em what happens when you mess with one of us." The plan was simple. Ride to the HOA's office, a fancy glass building in the heart of Willow Creek, and make their presence known. No guns, no fists, just a show of force. Marcus nodded. It wasn't about revenge. It was about respect. The next morning, the Vipers gathered at dawn. 10 bikes, engines roaring, rolled through the gates of Willow Creek. Marcus led the pack, his Harley rumbling like a storm. The HOA headquarters was a 2-story building with floor-to-ceiling windows and a sign out front that read, Willow Creek Community Association. It looked more like a corporate office than a neighborhood hub. The parking lot was empty except for a couple of
golf carts and a sleek black SUV with Compliance Division stenciled on the side. Marcus signaled for the crew to park in a tight formation, blocking the entrance. The message was clear: we're here, and we're not moving. Gary was the first to come out, clipboard in hand, his face red with indignation. "This is private property," he shouted. "You're in violation of—" Tommy cut him off, stepping forward. "We're not here to talk about violations, pal. We're here because you broke into our brother's house." Gary froze, his eyes darting between the bikes and the men. The rest of the HOA staff peered through the windows, some holding phones, probably calling for backup. Marcus stayed calm, his voice steady. "You owe me a door," he said. "And an apology. You don't get to storm into my home and threaten me." Gary tried to bluster, citing regulations and fines, but the Vipers weren't having it. Big Mike crossed his arms, his shadow falling over Gary like a cloud. Jake leaned against his bike, casually mentioning how easy it would be to misplace a few HOA records. The air was thick with tension, but Marcus kept it focused. "We're not here to break anything," he said. "But you need to understand something. You push me, I push back. And I've got a lot more friends than you do." The standoff lasted 10 minutes. Gary backed down, promising to review Marcus's case. The Vipers didn't trust him, but they'd made their point. As they rode out, the sound of their engines echoed through Willow Creek, a warning to anyone watching. Marcus felt a weight lift, but he knew this wasn't over. The HOA wouldn't let it go, and neither would he. Over the next week, Marcus fixed his door, using wood and hinges from his shop. The HOA sent a new notice, this one more polite, requesting a meeting to discuss his violations. Marcus showed up, not alone, but with Tommy and Jake. The meeting room was sterile, all white walls and fluorescent lights. Gary was there, along with a woman named Helen, the HOA president. She was all smiles, but her eyes were cold. "We're willing to waive the fines," she said, "if you agree to comply with our regulations moving forward." Marcus leaned back in his chair. "And if I don't?" Helen's smile didn't falter. "Then we'll have to escalate to legal measures." Marcus didn't blink. He'd done his homework. The HOA's bylaws were strict, but they weren't airtight. He'd found a loophole in the vehicle storage rule, something about temporary parking being exempt for up to 72 hours. He slid a copy of the bylaws across the table, his finger on the relevant section. "You broke into my house over a rule you didn't even enforce correctly," he said. "I could sue you for damages. Doors not cheap." Helen's smile finally cracked. Gary shifted uncomfortably. They didn't expect him to fight back with their own rules. The meeting ended with a stalemate. The HOA agreed to cover the cost of Marcus's door, but only if he signed a compliance agreement. Marcus refused. He wasn't about to let them control him. As he walked out, Tommy clapped him on the shoulder. "You're a stubborn bastard," he said, grinning. Marcus just nodded. He wasn't done yet. Back at the shop, the Vipers started digging. Jake, the tech guy, pulled public records on the HOA. Turns out, Willow Creek's compliance division had a history of overreach, fines that didn't hold up in court, complaints from residents who'd been bullied into compliance. Marcus wasn't the only one fed up. There was Mrs. Carter, a widow who'd been fined for planting roses without approval. Then there was Javier, a single dad hit with a $500 penalty for his kid's basketball hoop. The more they learned, the clearer it became. The HOA was a racket, preying on people too scared or tired to fight back. Marcus called a neighborhood meeting, not at the HOA's headquarters, but at his shop. He spread the word quietly, through texts and hushed conversations. On Saturday night, 24 residents showed up, nervous but curious. Marcus stood on a crate, his voice carrying over the hum of the shop's fluorescent lights. "They broke my door," he said. "They'll come for you next. We don't have to take it." He laid out the plan, a petition to dissolve the HOA's enforcement arm, backed by enough signatures to force a vote. It was legal, it was possible, and it was time. The petition took 3 weeks to circulate. Marcus and the Vipers went door to door, talking to neighbors who'd never dared speak up. Some were skeptical, afraid of retaliation, but others were ready. Mrs. Carter brought homemade cookies to the meetings. Javier offered to print flyers. By the end, they had 87 signatures, more than enough to call a special election. The HOA fought back, sending letters warning of consequences and holding closed-door meetings of their own. But the tide was turning. The election was held on a rainy Thursday in the community center. Marcus stood at the back, arms crossed, as Helen read the results. The vote to disband the compliance division passed, 112 to 19. Gary and his team were out of a job. The room erupted in cheers, but Marcus stayed quiet. He'd won, but he knew the HOA wouldn't vanish completely. They'd find new ways to flex their power. Still, for the first time in years, Willow Creek felt like a neighborhood again, not a prison. Marcus didn't throw a party. He didn't need to. That night, he and the Vipers rode out to the desert, the wind whipping past them as the sun set. They stopped at a dive bar, shared a round of beers, and toasted to sticking it to the man. Marcus looked at his crew, their faces lit by neon, and felt something he hadn't in a long time: peace. The HOA might come for him again, but he'd be ready. And he wouldn't be alone.